Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Following my video last week, I've had a bunch of comments asking me what size pricking iron should they buy. Now, does the size matter of the pricking irons you buy? Of course it does. The size matters for everything. But to start off with, let me just give you a bit of a background about the different shapes, because there are different shapes to pricking irons. There are different styles, essentially. Each of them does something different. Each of them does something completely different, and they work in a different way. They give a different result. So first of all, before we go into the sizes of them, because in order to go into the sizes of them, we have to understand what we're talking about. So, pricking irons come in 4 different styles. There's round, there's French style, there's diamond style, and there's punches. Now, they're all common in different areas of the world and different styles of work. Let's go in no particular order of the different styles. So to begin with, this round. So it's essentially an awl, kind of. So a round, I don't have one to show you because I don't use them, but a round pricking iron is a tool like my pricking irons that I showed the other day. However, instead of the teeth being lines, they're literally one prong. And there's 2 of them, 5 of them, 10 of them, 12, 20, whatever. There's the amount of teeth, but each of them is a prong on the tool. And these are common. I don't use them because I don't like how they look, because when you're using a prong, a round style pricking iron, you just get a hole, and it's not a shaped hole, it's literally just a round hole. And when you're stitching with these, you don't get an angled stitch in your stitching. Now, I really like the angled look. You may not. Each person's particular feelings on that will differ, and that's the fantastic thing about leatherwork, is it's not a one size it fits all. It's your style and how you do it. That's the round style. We have the French style. Now, this one I know most about because this one is the one I use, and funnily enough, it originates in France. It's the French style pricking iron, and it's a slot. So they're angled teeth. They make straight cuts in the leather, and you get when you stitch it, you get a beautiful angled stitch in your work. It looks beautiful. In my opinion, it looks beautiful and it looks elegant. I'm not saying that the other styles don't look elegant. I'm just saying that I particularly like this style. And this is used in very fine French leather work. And typically speaking, you don't use French style to punch all the way through in very traditional work. You prick mark it. But I'll go into that in a different video. This is just about in generally speaking. So the next one is the diamond. Now, this is what most people start with, because the round one, the French style one, and last of all the punches typically are most expensive because they're a little bit more premium, shall we say. For the diamond shape cuts literally a diamond in your work. Now, bear in mind, whatever pricking iron you use, whether it's French, round, diamond, punch, is the shape of the hole that it will leave. That's kind of the point of a pricking iron. It leaves a hole that you stitch through. So the diamond, you will get a diamond shape, and you'll get 20 of them or 50 of them or whatever it is that you're stitching, and that you will see in the end result, and you'll get a slightly different angle to your stitch. Now, it's what most people start with. They are cheap, and they are very, very readily available in the leather community. A huge amount of people use them. I started with them. Now, last, we're going to talk about punches. Now, I don't want to offend anyone, but I don't like punches. I don't like taking material away from my piece. And when you use a punch style, it's literally a hole punch. It's a hole that you're punching out of the leather. And I don't like that very much. I don't think it leaves as much of a fine, classy look to it. I'm not saying it doesn't, but in my opinion, it doesn't. They can look beautiful. Next, we're going to talk about the tooth width. This doesn't come into account for the round because the round is literally a dot. It comes into consideration with the rest of them though, because the tooth width is literally the width of the tooth. When you're punching the diamond or the French style or the punch, the width is how far of a cut that makes, or punch that makes. Typically speaking, they come in 1.35 mil all the way up to 2 mil. You can get some really big punches, and you can get some really big punches. As you can imagine, if you have a bigger punch, you need less of them, because you can't put two punches right next to each other because you'll have no strength of the leather left. If you're not using a round punch, typically I think Cinnabrook make a round punch. I'll put a little photo here. If you're not using that, you can put the spacing closer together. With the tooth spacing, they come in, and this is the ones I know. Please correct me in the comments below if I've missed one or don't get this quite right. But as far as I'm aware, they come in 1.93 mil all the way up to 6 mil. So the tooth spacing can be tiny, or they can be gigantic. The general consensus is that if you have stitches that are closer together, because it's harder to do, they're more difficult, and therefore they look more elegant, more classy, but up to you. Let's get on to why you clicked on the video. When should you use the small ones? The small ones are used with, and by small I mean the gap is closer together. For the small ones are more commonly used in thinner pieces and smaller pieces. One reason is because if you're using a small pricking iron, so let's say you're using a 2.7, which is quite small really, I know it goes smaller than that, but quite small, you'd use that on a watch strap or a card holder, or if you're in the equine industry, so the horse industry, you might use that for bridles because they look really elegant, having lots and lots of tiny stitches. You wouldn't necessarily use that on a belt where you're going to be doing thousands of them, just because it takes longer. And also, if the stitches are closer together, when you're stitching through it, you're going to use more thread because you're going back and forward much more, aren't you? So that's the small ones. The larger ones are kind of the opposite. Well, they are, typically speaking, the opposite. So if you've got a really long strap or belt or horse rein that you want to stitch, or you're doing around a car seat, if you're doing that manually, which you normally wouldn't, you'd probably want to use a bigger space. It can be stronger. You can use bigger threads. We'll get onto that, but you can use bigger thread, or you just don't want it to take quite as long because you don't want to be doing 10,000 bloody stitches in a row. So yes, you could use a 2.7, a 2 mil, a 1.93, but do you really want to be stitching 2 million times in 5 feet? I don't. But please, if you want to, go ahead. The fantastic thing about leatherwork is it's an expression of yourself in this piece. So if you really like the look of a zillion stitches really close together for 5 meters, they're also better for thicker. It's typically thought that when you have stitches that are really close together, it's a little bit weaker because you have less leather between each of the stitches. Let's move on to thread. And there are thousands of combinations for miles around. There is a zillion combinations made by different companies in different countries and different thicknesses and materials. But what you really need to know is, for the stitching iron I have, that you have, what the pricking iron that you have, what should you use? So if you're using a bigger hole spacing, use a bigger thread. It's kind of a rule of thumb. If you're using a bigger hole spacing, use a bigger thread. One reason is because getting a thicker thread through very small spacing can be very difficult. There's not really space for it. and it can look more elegant having a thinner thread when the stitches are very, very close together. If you want to go against the grain, please do, that's up to you. I'm just telling you a rule of thumb to get you started. So if you're using a small stitching iron, so let's say you're using a 2.7 because you're making a watch strap, I would recommend that you go for something like a 0.45 or a 0.55 millimeter thread. If you're using Misi, which I think is Chinese, fantastic thread company, it's an M40 is the 0.45. If you're using a bigger one, let's say you're using a 5mm spacing because you like the more rustic look, or you're using a punch, then you might want to go for like a 0.6 or a 0.8. Threads go all the way up to like 5mm thick. They can get really, really big, but we're talking about the smaller stuff. So for smaller pricking irons, smaller thread. For larger pricking irons, larger thread, to give you a starting point. Let me give you an example of the thousands of thread types. So there's two kind of main brackets: synthetic, and there is natural fiber. So it's normally polyester, polythread, or linen, but you can get other types. There's spun, there's wound, there's flat, there's loads of different types. I like the round ones. It's easier, it's harder to pierce it, because when you have the two threads in the hole and you're trying to pass the needles through, if it's a flat one like a tiger thread, it's very easy to pierce it, and then you kind of have to start again. But the round ones, it's easier to avoid. And they come in, so because there's polyester, linen, cotton, loads and loads of different types, and because there's loads of different sizes, there are probably billions of combinations. So I'm not going to go into that. If you want me to go into that at a later date, please leave a comment down below, and I will absolutely make a video, and it will be a year long about each of the different combinations. I'd love to do it. Would I love to do it? Yeah, I would. You guys are fantastic. You guys have been supporting me for years. On that note, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this content, because I'm really enjoying making it for you. So to close things up, if you have a smaller tooth size and a smaller spacing, use a smaller thread. And if you have a larger tooth size or punch and larger spacing between them, use a larger thread. If you can get a thread through a hole, you can use it in theory. Should you, I'll leave that up to you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I love making these for you. Like, comment, and subscribe as usual. Let me know what you want me to make or make a video about, because I'd love your input into the channel. And I will see you next time. Have a fantastic weekend or week, whenever it is that you're watching this. I'll see you later.